Mike Bohn here, joined by a very special guest, former NFL standout turned MMA promoter, Shawne Merriman. For a lot of people, they may know you, Shawne, from obviously everything you did in the world of football, but you're a very passionate MMA fan, which is obviously kind of our world here, and you've taken that into kind of the promoting side. Before we get into your promotion lights out, just tell me, like, when did your passion and love and following of mixed martial arts really begin?
It was back when I was playing. I grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland, man, a little bit outside of Washington, D.C. So, I grew up boxing. There was a lot of championship boxers. I had uncles that were professional boxers, so I had boxers in my family. I grew up that way. 2005, when I got drafted by the Chargers, I had got around Jay Glazer over at Fox Sports. Had a lot of guys over there. So, Jay said, "Look, I knew you grew up boxing. He's watched me box before. But I think MMA might help you in football." And I said, "Okay, really?" So yeah, might help you be a better outside linebacker and pass rusher. So I said, "Okay, cool, no problem." He sent me an address. The very next day that I showed up to the gym, it was Randy Couture in there. So that was my first day training MMA is with Randy. So I just, I stuck around, man. I started training with the guys during every off season. This was when, Tyron Woodley, he was coming on. I was in the gym with him, back in the late 2000s. So I've been around the sport, man, for 17 years. So it was really only natural for me to make that transition in the first place.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Did you see being around the sport as much as you were, like things that maybe you liked or disliked that kind of took you down this path towards being a promoter? Like, I want to get actually involved with it so I can help the sport out on like a fundamental level?
Yeah, that was one of the main things for me because, playing in the NFL, man, you see things at the biggest scale possible. The Sunday night footballs, the Monday night footballs, the production, and how things are ran. And I always felt that if I was able to, kind of bring some of the things that I've learned being in the NFL, getting into the broadcasting booth. I was at NFL Network when I got done over at Fox Sports, ESPN, and back to Fox Sports. So, being on the TV side of production and producing shows as well, man. It was just a natural fit, outside of me being around the guys again. You ask any former NFL guy, the first thing they'll tell you is they miss being in the locker room, miss being around the guys, and they miss competing. Even still now to this day, I'll go and I'll get sparring sessions in. The guys will be in camp. I'll go and get me a couple of days or a week in their training camp. So I've been around this thing for a long time.
Definitely. Who've like been some of your favorite fighters to watch over the years?
I've always Chuck is my boy. I've always been a big Chuck Liddell fan and Tito. Obviously Randy, and those are guys who I kind of was around, right? As MMA was kind of heating up, so I was around them a lot. And I started going to UFC fights back in 2006. 2007. I was at probably 3 or 4 fights a year. So, I got a chance and I worked with Bellator for a little bit over there with Scott Coker, for about a year and a half or two. So, like I said, man, it was time for me to launch my own promotion, my own league. And also too, concentrate on getting some of these former athletes transition over in MMA because it's going to happen. And I've been saying it the last, 8 years. We're starting to see, the Adrian Peterson, the guys, Le'Veon Bell and Greg Hart. So we're starting to see a lot of these guys make that transition. But I'm going to tell you this, watch over the next, 12 to 24 months. Watch how many big name former NFL guys transition over into MMA. It's guaranteed going to happen.
Yeah, is there anyone who you see right now that you feel is like a high potential for that, who's still doing their thing in the NFL, or do you think it's going to be guys who are kind of maybe a bit out of the league at this point?
Yeah, it's going to be some guys that's out the league. And then too, look, everybody can't play 10 plus years in the NFL. They just won't. So you're going to get that college linebacker from University of Maryland where I went to, or Ohio State, or a strong safety that's coming from South Carolina, something like that. So those guys are going to start transitioning, and it's happening right now. I get calls. I'm talking to guys this right now playing for the XFL. They want to take a couple fights during the offseason. So for me, not only was it a passion, man, but I think that it's a necessity. You see a lot of these guys struggling, trying to figure out what's next when they're done. And, we over at Lights Out Extreme Fight, man, we've been kind of segueing these guys into it to make it happen.
Yeah, and I guess it's kind of like an unfair question to ask you. I'm sure you've been asked it a million times about like what's more dangerous between like football and MMA. Do you feel like that's a fair question to even ask, just given like the different dynamics of it?
Uh, no, it's not. It's not unfair. I don't think because look, they're both violent sports, right?
Exactly.
And being taking on a fullback on a power play, and then or getting clocked with overhand right clean on your chin. I mean, they both hurt. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I think with football, there's a lot of other things you have to worry about because of the sprinting and the cutting and the cut blocking, getting rolled up in a big pile from an offensive lineman behind you. Those things you have to worry about, but they're both violent, man. I've been hitting both, so I can't really point it out and say, hey, I like this one more than I like that one because they both hurt.
Yeah, that's very fair. So yeah, let's talk about lights out extreme fighting. So like where when you started this, what was ultimately like the mindset? Because regional MMA, man, like I've talked to a lot of promoters over the year. It's not an easy game, right? Because there's a lot of stuff that goes into it from trying to like turn a profit to trying to get the crowds out to trying to get the fighters that makes sense. Like what's kind of when you started, like what what was like the vision and how you wanted this thing to go?
Well, for me, I've always, even back in my career when I was playing football, I've always been about the fans. So, right now we're just implementing more and more fan engagement opportunities where we can get not only get people to the fights, but that the people at home that's watching us on football. We're live on football sports, football TVs. And matter of fact, our last fight that we had last month in Burbank broke into football sports top 5 most watched ever. And they got some great programs over there. So and by the way, man, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors out here about how well some of these promotions and stuff doing. Like the reason why I don't jump up and down and you don't hear these things because I feel like we're supposed to. We got great fighters, great product, the fans that come out. And we just want to continue to get these guys, these up and coming guys, an opportunity to be seen. Because believe it or not, man, there's not a whole lot of great promotions out here. I mean, I know they talk like they are, but there's not a whole lot of them. So we want to be one of the quality ones to give these guys a shot.
And what is your process in putting together the biggest show yet? Like, do you work with like a matchmaker on your team? Who are some of the other kind of people from behind the scenes that help you put together the entire event?
Yeah, because since we're going to San Diego, man, I loaded up with a lot of, I would say 80% local talent or 85% local talent. So I'll get with the matchmakers and, everything's in house. Our production's in house, operations in house. And that's how, you're right. You said it before. This business is tough. It's crazy. It's chaotic. And, I like to operate in chaos, I like to say. But when you're running the show, man, and you have when you're grown like we are, it's a really, really cool thing, man. It's a cool feeling because, we're seeing guys, we just got, 2 guys just left us from the last fight that's going over to the UFC, and so for us, I'm like, hey, we just like to give guys an opportunity and give them a shot.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question because it's always the interesting thing at promotion kind of in your space. Like, are you trying to build up stars to help your own brand who can stay there, or is it ultimately to help the grassroots level of the sport? Because guys need experience, guys need places to fight to build up that record to be in the UFC.
Yeah, to be grassroots, man. Look, UFC was a big part of me getting into the sport. To be quite honest, right? When I got drafted by the Chargers, I was like one of the first football players who was like tied into MMA and the UFC and everything. I was going to all the fights and I was with all these guys. And so obviously that was what piqued my interest in this business and in this sport in the first place. But for us, man, look, I played at the University of Maryland, and one day I wanted to go to the NFL, right? Like I know that feeling, and I know how guys look at it. And there's other really good promotions out here, but it's so many trying to be the UFC right now. And it's kind of like really that part has gotten under my skin. It's like, man, look, let them, let UFC be them, right? And everybody else be you. And it's just gotten out of hand with these comparisons of trying to be them. We're not, man. We got some really cool tech coming, very innovative. We're going to get a bunch more fans involved at home through football because they obviously got a tech platform there. So that's what we're about, man. Just being cool, being creative. Obviously, I love the sport so much and I'm competitive. Like, yeah, I want to be up there. We want to be mentioned with the best, but our goal is not to be like anyone else out there. And we got some pretty cool stuff we're going to announce on the tech side and just some innovation coming that we're concentrating on. And all the other promotions out there, if you're trying to be the UFC, go ahead. For us, we don't care.
No, I think that's the right mentality to have everything, and then you take your steps, and who knows where things go in the future, right? But I think for where you're at now, just as like the sport as a whole, you mentioned, being around those guys in the mid 2000s and everything, and here we are in 2023, and just seeing how big the sport is, on ESPN, you see it right up there, being covered in a lot of the same ways as like an NFL or an NBA or whatever. Does that in any way surprise you to see, like, from when you first got into it to how much this has exploded in modern day now?
No, not at all. Even when people talk about, I know, fighter pay is a big deal, right? I'll give you a perfect example. Back when I was playing, a top guy in my position or like myself, wasn't getting paid as much as a guy that's coming off the bench now, right? And so everything's getting better. Believe it or not, MMA isn't even a fraction as big as it's going to be in the next 5 years. I mean, it's going to be massive in the next 5 years. And fighter pay is going to get better. The branding, guys training, everything is going to get better because they've really only been around for about 20, 25 plus years. So it's still new, it's still fresh. But trust me, the next 5 years, MMA is going to be off the charts.
Yeah, and you've obviously, being in the NFL, come from the sport that, since you mentioned their kind of fighter pay, had unionization and figured out how to get collective bargaining and shares of the revenue and all that kind of stuff. Do you think that's even possible in a sport like MMA, where it's all individual and there'll always be a guy willing to step up and take an opportunity that someone else may try to stand up and fight against and things like that? Like, can you even fathom it happening at kind of the highest level where everyone is able to come together and kind of maybe get a bigger share through collectively working together?
Yeah, it's going to happen, right? And I'm not just talking about the union side or anything like that. It's just things are going to get better. Look what these guys are getting paid right now. Izzy, what John Jones' contract looked like. All the bigger guys, what their contracts look like. You think in the mid 2000s that some of those guys who really made or was a big part of what the UFC is, that they wouldn't die for that amount of money. So, like, everything is going to get better, and people need to understand that just is going to happen, right? A union, I don't think is going to happen, but the fighter pay and just the medical and health care and all, I mean, it's going to eventually happen, and it's coming, and it's not that far away.
Yeah, definitely hope so. And I have to ask you, since I know it's kind of been dabbled out there over the years, like, is Shawne going to take a fight himself? Is he going to go in there? Is that something that's like even remotely on your radar still? What would the circumstances have to be? And is that something you're actually still considering at this point in time?
So, yeah, well, look, I've been around a lot of guys. I hate to say where my skill level is at of who I've been in there with, but if you ask around with all the guys I've sparred with and trained with, they can tell you I can go, right? They'll tell you that. I think the biggest thing for me is the opportunity have to be big enough in order for me to stop everything I'm doing, because I always say this: you can play basketball, you can play football, you cannot play fighting, right? It's not one of those things where, oh, I'm gonna go test it out and see how it is, right? Or I'm gonna go try this out. You do it or you don't do it. It's not the sport for that. And we've seen athletes who try to transition and it ain't work out for them because it's just not one of those things that you just get into to do. At Lights Out Xtreme Fight, man, I'm pretty much behind the scenes on everything, from the sponsorship, venue deals, everything goes through me. So in order for me to stop what I'm doing or bring somebody else to pick up the slack for that, it's going to have to be big. But I did put out 2 proposals to former athletes over the past 3 months to fight them in Lights Out Xtreme Fight. One former guy that used to play for the Chiefs and the Dolphins offensive lineman who's been training for a long time. He walks up to my publicist at Radio Row and at the Super Bowl and said, "Hey, he wanted to scrap." And this is a guy who I had a problem with a little bit when I played. And so I said, if you serious, then, let me know. And he was. So I put a proposal out there to him to fight possibly in Lights Out Xtreme fight sometime this year. So we'll see where that lands. But it's one of those things, man. I'll go in and train. I'll probably slide past Black House or something today. I'm here in LA and they got open mat on Friday. I'll probably slide over there and get some work in with some guys. It's just, for me, it's just work anyway. I'm around it. I do it, but I'm not closing myself off from taking a fight in Lights Out Xtreme fighting this year.
Awesome. Yeah, you can tell your passion for the sport is very genuine. Do you follow, like how closely embedded are you still with the NFL world? Is that something, are you watching every single week or is it? Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Early pick for the Super Bowl? Who's your extremely early lean this season coming up?
Well, the thing is, you can never, as long as Patrick Mahomes is there, right? With Casey, you're not, and he's in the division. I'm a Charger for life. You always got to look at them as having an opportunity going back, right? They have an opportunity going back. But I tell you, man, God, there's some teams this year. I think that's going to really turn some heads. Some young quarterbacks. I think, I really love what Houston's doing. I'm not saying that Houston's going to go down there, but I think the Texans are going to look much better this year. They got a quarterback and defensive end, a pass rusher. Believe it or not, I think the Bills, my former Bills, got an opportunity going back there. I love Josh Allen and obviously my Chargers. So that AFC division, man, is so crazy. It's hard because you got 6 really good quarterbacks you got to go through in order to get there, including Joe Burrow.